and with the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, people are really waking up and apologizing to myself and others now, and really starting to click. So people are really coming out of that trance.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that. I want you to expand on that. But also, the monster is out of the closet. Why is it so out of the closet now? Why would Lindsey Graham and others in the Senate say, you bet it's for citizens and we want to scare you? And he looked like he was on drugs or something. I mean, they really are going crazy in front of everybody.
Well, I think let's break it up. You have different groups. You have the people who are in charge. And of course, my biggest question is who's really in charge and why are they behaving this way? But, you know, one of the things that happens when you centralize, Alex, is that once you finish centralizing, there's a whole bureaucracy in the middle you don't need anymore. And I think one of the things we're seeing from things like the National Defense Authorization Act provisions this year is, you know, all the guys up and down in the middle in a highly centralized system are terribly, terribly insecure. And so, you know, we see them passing provisions like that because they're scared. It reflects insecurity. It doesn't reflect security because, you know, right now, if the U.S. budget has a $5 trillion deficit and the boomers are retiring and need their Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, how are you going to keep that going? Well, the global taxation that you need to keep the empire going is greater and greater force and greater control. And I think what we're watching is a very, you know, an empire which is very spread and is a very uncomfortable position to be in those middle positions. And so it's an insecure empire, and I think it's one you kind of want to, you know, it's fine to comment on it, but you don't want to get in a tussle with it.
No. In fact, before we did this show tonight, I shot a special report that's going to be out tomorrow where that's my central point is they're afraid is why they did the NDAA. That's why they said, yeah, we'll lock up citizens. It's an attempt, you know, the fact that they're dispensing with a velvet glove shows just how weak they are.
Right. Well, think about it. In 1998, when I saw all the early stages of what was going on, whether it was the patenting of life and control of the seed supply and the manipulations in the oil markets and precious metals, on and on, the housing bubble, you know, I came to the conclusion that the only way I could explain all of these disparate acts and centralization was they're planning on depopulating. And I always tell the story of a wonderful portfolio strategist from London who flew in to see me and said, you know, can I meet you in the woods? And he said to me, the only thing I can conclude is they're planning on significant depopulation. I can't explain these different things. And I said, well, that's very interesting because that's the only thing I can come up with. But at that point, I came to the realization that I had to be prepared to live, you know, through a period where, in fact, that might be happening. And I think one of the reasons they're afraid is as people begin to realize what they're doing with the food supply, with water, with chemtrails, whatever, and you come to that realization, you know, you can get pretty ornery. And I remember when the swine flu, you know, vaccine came out, that's when I decided, okay, I'm drawing the line. That's when the guns come out. And, you know, this is a country that's highly armed and highly ornery. So you can see why being a manager who's basically implementing policies that depopulate, why you would feel very insecure against the general population right now.
Well, you are always right at the zeitgeist. That's what I covered before you came on with us tonight. Record gun sales, probably around 300 million. They're not sure. There was 1.5 plus million in the month of December, instant checks. That's only part of gun sales, is through the regular system. And they estimate that the average person bought 2.1 guns. That's 3 million plus guns bought in 1 month. All the so-called liberals I know now realize the government isn't their friend, run by mega corporations. They've all been buying guns. And I'm not saying that's the answer to everything, but at an instinctive level, the people are arming to the teeth. Because they had a survey out last week. They were saying, why are you buying guns? And the most common answer was imminent collapse, social unrest, and the government's criminal. Right. So they've, I mean, it's really a bunch of desperate Ceausescu types like Romania up there saying, fine, we'll just arrest you all. But if they actually try to march the military and police off against the people, that's not going to go too well.
Well, in fact, and I don't, the one of the few groups I'm not afraid of right now is the military, because, one of my questions is, if things keep going the way they're going, or do we run the risk of a military coup, not because the military are being bad guys, but because the system is so irresponsible?
Well, I know we've had the last two Joint Chiefs of Staff chairmen refuse to attack Iran. So now they've put Dempsey in, who sounds like he's has a mental problem or is a mental deficient. I'm not trying to be mean.
Right. No. But it's funny because if you look at who in the United States is a true believer in the Constitution, a lot of that loyalty to the Constitution is within the military. So we're in a funny situation where the civil leadership is not committed to the Constitution, but a lot of the people in the military are. And of course, the military, the funny thing about the military, Alex, is they have to deliver. And when the political leadership spreads them this thin, that's a nerve-wracking position to be in, because you're responsible for the whole thing. And make no mistake about it, you bring down the dollar fast overnight and you can crash the whole globe. So,
well, let's talk about that then, because you've got the military, as you know, giving more donations to Ron Paul than Obama and all the other dwarves combined on the Republican side. That's got to worry the system. So there's this paradox. They want to use the military against the people, but I do talk to the military. They are awake. That's why the MIAC and Homeland Security reports list the military as the, quote, #1 enemy of the government. So it's very schizophrenic.
It's a very unusual thing to talk about the military and the people being, aligned. And I think, the thing we have to understand at the heart of the whole machine is that we have a non-sustainable economic model. It's been the military's job to keep that non-sustainable economic model going. And now the fundamental issue is, how do we change? And the reality is, we've been centralizing in a way that destroys wealth. Now what we've got to do is we've got to build wealth. And the way to do that is to do it in a decentralizing way. And the challenge that the leadership has is, how do you keep the old cash flows pumping along while people figure out the new? And what I'd love to do, Alex, is I'd like to talk about some of the really positive developments that happened in 2011, which I think are important for people to pick up on.
Yeah, I want to do that. And then I want to look forward to, because you mentioned, the ruling elite obviously wanting to cut off resources, post-industrial world, not to create a sustainable one, but just to totally basically get rid of much of the human labor, because they don't need us anymore, because they have machines and things. And then, how you see those two things colliding. But yeah, let's talk about some of the positive things that happened in 2011.
Have you done any coverage of the maker movement?
No, tell me about it.
The maker movement is groups of people who are getting together and learning how to make stuff themselves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and in fact, there's one wonderful presentation. I had an open source software developer who's doing sort of designs for the 50 pieces of machinery you need to run any community. And of course, one of the ways that communities have been drained is by, getting, the way that they drain the small farmers is you get on the sort of farm equipment treadmill. And the more we can make and do our own machines, it's very positive. These are things that young kids can learn to do. There's no reason why, somebody, in 7th and 8th grade can't learn how to make mom's toaster. So to me, the maker movement is very exciting. The emphasis on fresh food and growing your own food is just exploding.
Oh, sure. You're talking about getting back to the land, true local sustainability movement. Absolutely. And people learning how to machine again, and a big movement to build, firearms.
Well, the big thing we have needed for 2 decades now is to, right now what we're doing is we're destroying small business. What we need to do is build small business. And so one of the things I am very hopeful of is more and more people see the beasts as they are. They start to say, okay, how can I start to circulate more capital locally? So I think the shift to bank locally has been very positive. But the next step then is, how do we build local equity markets? Don't send our money to Wall Street and beg for it to come back. Let's start to circulate it locally, and let's start to support the small businesses where we are, because that's how we're going to create new jobs. And one of the things we've seen is the beginning, you're starting to see the word introduced into the lexicon of, it's called advanced manufacturing. And believe it or not, with some of the developments and things like 3D printing, we could see a lot of manufacturing come back on shore. Now, it's going to be not labor intensive, but there's no reason that small manufacturers throughout America can't start to compete with much, much bigger companies. So robotics and advanced manufacturing can make a tremendous difference in the U.S. economy over the next 20 years.
Now, just backing up what you're saying, this isn't just some fad or pie in the sky hype you're talking about. There's a giant movement towards organic farming, a giant movement towards organic milk, a giant move towards local communities, as people really figure out how fun it is to buy local, how to produce. Huge communities where I live, especially the middle class and upper middle class, but also working class folks are getting into this. But and to prove that that's so central and is actually where it's at, the system, as you know, is coming in targeting Amish, organic milk producers, small manufacturers. The system is threatened by buying locally and being self-sufficient. Why is this centralizing system so threatened by it?
Well, I think there are a couple reasons. First of all, Alex, agriculture, the cash flows related to the production and distribution of food is an enormous part of any economy. So that's number one. And so if you can consolidate that into large corporations, you can make a lot of money, but you can also, it's all part of centralizing economic control. But there's another issue, and that is, for many, many decades, the dollar has been the global reserve currency, and there's been great economic and financial benefit to everybody in America by enjoying the wealth that comes as a result of that. Now, to have a global reserve currency, you need to control a global asset, and that global asset has been oil. And I think one of the reasons you're seeing such a move to control the seed supply, to patent life, to control the food supply, is because if we're going to have a new global currency, we need a different asset than oil, particularly because energy technology, we know that energy technology exists that can replace fossil fuels. So if that energy technology is going to see the light of day or practical application, then you need something else to replace the bolstering.
And that's why they want to go to GMO.
Right. And I think one of the reasons you want GMO, put aside, there may be some sort of geophysical weather issues, but I think that's the source of total control and total financial control, and oil doesn't do it. And so I suspect it's eating food. Now, if you look at what that does in terms of centralizing the economy, it's devastating. So many small farms have been put out of business in this country, not because they're not economic or productive, because in fact, technology, Alex, should decentralize, not centralize the way it's been used. It's because of the food safety rules. And that's why this Christmas, every year we have a donation from Solari to a sort of worthy cause. Our donation was from the Consumer to Farm Legal Defense Fund, because at the heart of freedom, there are a couple of legal issues which are at the heart of freedom, and one of them is absolutely defending the right of farmers and consumers to get together and eat whatever food they want.
Sure, there's an all-out assault against lemonade stands, Amish farmers, people selling tomatoes on the side of the road, as you know, because it is right there at the heart. And just like 15 years ago, you couldn't find organic food on store shelves, now it's supplanting, all the toxic food, or at least the establishment's trying to claim they're organic now. That shows the power of voting with our dollars. And I know that is a drum that you have beat, and you really have written detailed reports, video reports. They're all on the Solari website. And so there is hope in all of this. Shifting gears into a few of the other solutions.
Okay, so I think circulating, learning how to circulate capital locally and through networks So let's get our equity capital moving, and let's get it possible. Let's switch the economics for small business startup. Part of that is this advanced manufacturing. I had an activist. I was in a conference in Switzerland, and one of the